Different geometric forms, based on the shape-caused wave, create different energetic effects. But there's a deeper level behind that, and that is different geometric forms actually resonate with different levels of creation, or what Dr. Karim calls planes of nature. So this is called the Ibrahim Karim Universal Pendulum, and it actually combines shapes of multiple different plane levels: the physical, the vital, the emotional astral, the mental, the causal, the spiritual, and the divine levels, that all have particular geometries that resonate with them. This means that by using the correct geometric form, the ancient Egyptians understood they could create a direct resonant exchange, like with an antenna, based on the sacred geometry. Sacred geometry became an antenna to resonate with a particular higher plane. So for example, if we take a look at this level, what in the human being is the emotional body and emotional function, and referred to as an outer plane in the Western tradition as the astral plane. Astral coming from a root aster, meaning star, meaning a source of light. And the forms that connect to that are the form of a hemisphere or a pyramid. So when they use the form of a pyramid, it wasn't just for pyramid power as an energy, but what pyramid power actually is the negative green ray that was identified by the French, the penetrating carrier ray. That comes from this particular form. Both a hemisphere and a pyramid create that negative green emanation. But the reason why that form is creating the emanation is because the shape itself acts like an antenna for the astral plane. And that's why they knew further that by modifying the shape on the pyramid, by making a slight indentation in the center of the four faces of the pyramid, it's so slight you can't see it from the ground. You have to see it from the air. And from the air, you can see here the slight indentation at the faces of the major pyramids at Giza Plateau. What that did is it changed the resonance of the pyramid from the general astral plane, where the lower astral has some questionable energetics, to resonate with the higher astral. And when you do that, it cleans up the energy that's being projected by the pyramid. So one of the great secrets is the geometries act like antennas to resonate with higher planes of creation, and then as a secondary effect, they will emanate through the shape-caused wave a particular vibration that is the result of that particular connection. And they knew enough about it, in fact, to work not just with the general negative green ray, as we see here, but actually to work with sub-bands or sub-energies inside the general band. So the placement of the king's chamber inside the Great Pyramid is not in the exact middle, where you might expect it to be. It's not in the middle. It's about 6 degrees, 15 minutes off of center. And so that's to get a particular carrier wave within the negative green band that's a sweet spot in the entire band. A sweet spot for being able to connect a person through a carrier wave to higher dimensional levels, which is why that place in the king's chamber was used for these initiation rituals, as described by the Freemasons and others. So this is the vertical and horizontal wave pendulums. For each of the bands, the energy may either propagate parallel to the Earth's surface, we call it a horizontal wave, or it can move perpendicular, and we call that a vertical wave. They create different biological effects. And so we have two different pendulums to be able to detect it, and they're fairly simple to use, so they can be set to particular angles, and then you can detect any of the vibrational bands that you care to. To detect the energy of the center, the BG3 energy, we have a particular pendulum that is designed in such a way that it resonates like an antenna with those vibrations. And this not only can be used for design purposes, to design things that have the strong vibration to them, it also can be used to test things that naturally have this energy. So what makes a spiritual power spot in nature is that it has a strong concentration of this universal harmonizing force, the BG3. Every classical tradition is the guardian of particular places on the Earth's surface that are their spiritual power spots. And now you can tell a true power spot from a false one that's been falsely claimed to be one, is that it has a strong concentration of this BG3 vibration if it's a true power spot. In the microcosm of a human body, those power spots appear as the chakras, acupuncture points, cells of the body, all of which naturally have this BG3 energy as well. One of the core concepts is that in the ancient Egyptian temple science, they had a grid pattern that I showed you before, and the 19-level grid was connected to the archetypal energy body of the human being. at what we think of in the West today as the causal plane level. But in ancient Egypt they had different names for these things. But on the causal plane level, this energetic grid was used to pattern out everything on the temple walls so that they had a vibration on the wall, like it was a living being. And that grid itself was adapted by Dr. Karim after he discovered it to become a vibrational tool that allows us to actually detect on what we call the human archetype ruler. Putting a sample here, moving up the central axis, we can test on 10 different BG quality levels. Once we add in a secondary axis here, it makes the entire thing come alive. When the two axes are together, it activates the dormant energy, and at that point we use it as an energy balancing tool and as an energy projector. Now, this was one of the fundamental sciences of the ancient world. They understood that the entire Earth is based on a vibrational grid network that then manifests on any particular point of land in a set of energetic lines that superimpose in particular ways. These energy lines may either have a detrimental energy quality, what we call geopathic grids, or they may have highly beneficial qualities, because when they're on a sacred power spot, they're running the BG3 energies. So, for example, here is a particular church in Germany, and when you do an energetic analysis of where it's situated, it has to be on a power spot. Today, we'll put a church in any old place. We'll put it in a strip mall. We don't think anything about the energetics of it. But in the ancient world, you would never build a temple for any tradition anywhere but on a sacred power spot. Otherwise, it simply wouldn't have the right energetics that you're trying to connect a person to. It wasn't just an abstract intellectual thing. You had to connect a person's energetic field, their grid pattern, back to the larger energetic grid through a sacred power spot. Where is the largest beneficial energy line running within the sacred power spot? That's going to be the central axis of the building. Then where are the different energy lines coming in? And where the majority of beneficial energy lines are crossing together. Whenever energy lines cross together, they create a vortex. And if it's a beneficial energy, then it's a beneficial BG3 vortex. And so that's going to be where they place the altar. So they're actually using the Earth's own energy lines to pattern out everything for the temple, because the temple has to operate like an organ in a living body. The building has to rise up out of the Earth's energy field like a living thing. Now, again, that was for all the different sacred sites of every great tradition. So Feng Shui, Vastu Vidya, the Egyptian temple science, all based on similar concepts. But of course, that's when the energies are beneficial. When the energies are detrimental, the Germans in the last 100 years have identified the way that these toxic subtle radiations coming from the earth grids have the effect of scrambling the energetic information in living beings. Now, in the German research, some of which was paid for by the German and Austrian government, they identify the way that these subtle radiation grids, when you sleep on a crossing of the earth grids, it leads to all types of degenerative processes in whatever part of the body is over the crossing. Particularly cancer is described in great detail in the German publications. And so this gives an example from one of the German texts of what actually happens, whether in a human body or on plants. That detrimental radiation scrambles the information at a cellular level that leads to healthy cell replication. And so this is what you see in the plant. You get these tumorous growths from the scrambling of the information. This shows all the different earth lines that are crossing at this point. And unfortunately, the German research shows the same thing in a human body for the creation of tumors and scrambling of the field. And so that's why the German dowsers, and then from them got picked up by the British and then the Americans, etc., would then use mental dowsing because they didn't know the vibrational techniques. Mental dowsing was a thing that spread more easily because it's not a technical field. The vibrational radiesthesia is highly technical and deeply scientific, and it takes a longer time to teach people, but it goes much deeper in its potential. But using mental dowsing, they were able to identify the placement of the grids, and primarily what they try to do is identify where the grids are crossing at a person's bed so that they can try to protect the person from those effects. Now, what's used in North American mental dowsing circles is primarily trying to block the grid or divert the grid in some way, but that's not the Egyptian technique. The Egyptian technique is to be able to transmute the detrimental energy in the grid to a beneficial energy. transmute the detrimental energy to the universal harmonizing energy, the BG3. That's a whole nother level of operation that is much more beneficial and requires a much deeper level of knowledge. But whenever you go outside and you see that there's a hedge growing normally, but in one particular place it goes all the way down to the ground, it's all brown and decayed, earth grid is passing through that point. See a line of ant hills in the earth. Ants love the earth radiation lines. They're building their hills directly on the line. Whenever you see termites, things that are nature's system to tear down and destroy and reprocess physical matter, it's all connected to these detrimental grids. You don't want to be sleeping on those grids. It's also connected to accident areas on the road. And that's well known in North American mental dowsing circles, because the Germans did projects where they would hook up a person's brain to EEGs and then expose them to crossings of toxic earth energy lines, and you immediately see the brainwave scramble. So when a person goes across these areas on the road, the brainwaves scramble, they lose their focus, and there are repeated accidents at the same location. Now, what most people in Western mental dowsing circles know for the earth energy grids are the grids that come up from inside the earth and rise straight up like walls. That's what's being shown here with these green lines. They're coming from below and rising straight up like walls in the space, and then they cross. And the crossing points are the most dangerous. But there are other lines that are shown here with red lines that Dr. Karim has identified in recent years that are earth energy lines that are cutting across horizontally in the space as well. Those are not well known to mental dowsers in the West, but they're very important, very significant. They can be very toxic, and they must also be addressed. Again, these horizontal earth energy lines may be beneficial or detrimental. The problem is that we've created so much electromagnetic radiation in our environments that the electromagnetic radiation is turning this energy highly detrimental, because the quality of energy to run the energy on the Earth's own energy meridian lines, the earth grids, is the same vibrational quality as the energy that we're using to project electromagnetic fields. That means the two will couple together. And whatever you have for electromagnetic fields in an environment will couple with the earth energy grids, make them more toxic, and become something that is a problem that has to be solved, and that we go into great detail on in the biogeometry work. But this was something the ancients knew about too. In those days, the grids were not so toxic because they were smart enough not to cover the Earth with a range of toxic vibrations the way that we're intensifying year by year in our modern electromagnetic technology. So that's why the Germans were able to identify that if you go to Giza Plateau, they did not level Giza Plateau the way that you would in any modern building project today. You would level the entire thing so everything's flat, and then you would build the 3 different pyramids. They didn't do that in Egypt. Every one of the pyramids, 3 major pyramids at Giza Plateau, has a different foundation level. There are different heights. So how did they know how to balance them? The Germans found that the horizontal grid lines were used for leveling of the placement of the base of each pyramid. So that identified for them exactly where the baseline would be. Just like I showed you before, when they built the temple, they built it on the earth energy lines. They used the horizontal grid lines to be the foundation of the entire structure and to be the foundation of the different rooms or chambers in the structures. There is a particular creation pattern that you see Dr. Karim has put into form here, where it's 2 hyperbola. And in the human energy field, this actually operates as one that goes through the central axis of the body, and that's what he refers to as the spiritual axis. And then there's the time-space axis that runs more on the horizontal axis through the body. And so a bulge appears on one of these because when the independent being begins to perceive within space-time, it creates an expansion from the center outward, and it creates the bulge you see here. Now what this leads to then is that Dr. Karim found that there was a resonance when he broke the 2 forms apart to be 2 pillars. Sometimes he refers to them as the pillars of wisdom. This one here, without the bulge, without the space-time perception, resonates very strongly with the right brain hemisphere and the intuitive perception of a human being. The one with the space-time perception that grounds things into physical reality has the bulge coming out from the center from space-time perception. That's connected to the rational faculties of the left brain. Dr. Karim then added our biogeometry dials to the top that allows us to tune in different vibratory powers. So what you can do with this is you can actually tune any person's brain hemispheres to specific vibratory states so that you can activate different functions in their body. So one of the things that we demonstrate is that if you activate the person's visual cortex in their brain in properly tuning it in with this tool, what you can then do is from the visual cortex you can fill it with the BG3 unified source vibration, and anything the person looks at will immediately harmonize with BG3 energy. They will become a harmonizing force straight through the visual ray coming out of the eyes. This is going into then practical things that they would do in the Egyptian temples with modern technique.